All right, so like in my video cut out for some reason. But anyway, going back to what I was saying, um, they would call Sicilians the niggas of Italy. And I'm gonna play it again.
Language, but I'm just quoting the Times. Nigger Sicilians, expression that Southern Italians were called, I believe they're saying Southern Italians, Sicilians, I'm half Sicilian, were called, quote unquote, and pardon my language, but I'm just quoting the Times, nigger wops.
Right, so like I said, and he's just quoting what they used to call Sicilians. That's all he's doing. But you got people getting offended and saying, "Oh my God, he said the N-word," but that goes to show you how sensitive America is, okay, to that N-word, okay, because all he's doing is quoting, what they were called, but everyone's in such an uproar, about him actually saying it, you know, but America is just hypocritical. All right. Here's another article. I'm gonna play it, and then I'm gonna get some precepts.
He used the N-word during a... Reporters are requesting an apology after he used the N-word during a radio interview. The term was a direct quote from an article Cuomo was referencing. CBS 2's Andrea Klein-Thomas is in our newsroom with more on the context and reaction to this. Andrea.
Well, Dana, the New York Times wrote the term in an editorial that was published this weekend. Governor Cuomo repeated it. The question is if there is ever an acceptable medium for the term to be used at all.
They used an expression that Southern Italians were called.
Interview, Governor Cuomo was referencing this New York Times editorial that discusses the historical attacks on Italian immigrants when he referenced a direct quote that used the N-word. The interview began with Cuomo discussing his thoughts on yesterday's Columbus Day observance, his pledge to fund a statue of Mother Cabrini, and the continued prevalence of anti-Italian sentiments and overall hate that he urged all cultures to denounce.
I think when the New York Post put my family as the mafia godfather family after Christopher was called Fredo, was that ugly Italian-American stereotype.
But the conversation had moved past that.
So anyway, all right, so you pretty much get the point. Everyone is demanding an apology and yada, yada, yada. But like I said, it's really not that big of a deal because I perceive this guy to be a Jake anyway, all right? So you people got to get over this N-word phobia that you have, man. The guy was just quoting what they used to call Sicilians. And there's a reason why they used to call Sicilians that is because they really were niggas, Just like the same way, you may call an Asian person who acts black. A lot of Jakes will call them a nigga because they act just like a nigga. And it's not any type of derogatory word. It's just pretty much slang at this point. All right, it's newspeak. So anyway, and this is proving the point. Now, we're gonna prove the point that Israel, all right, which are you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, all right, you were spread across the world, okay? And the Gentiles that the Bible speaks of, okay, you have two types of Gentiles. You have the natural Gentiles, which are your heathens, which are the nations outside of Israel. And you have your unnatural Gentiles, which are the Israelite foreigners that were stuck in a Gentile state of mind, okay? They were influenced. Just like you have a lot of our people that are Americanized today, okay, they're considered American, okay, because they're not adhering to their true nationality, okay. Now, anyway, this is Jeremiah 31:10. It says, "Hear the word of the Lord, O ye nations, and declare in the isles afar off, and say, He that scattered Israel will gather him and keep him, as a shepherd doth his flock." Okay, so the point there is the fact that the Lord scattered Israel. Okay, the Lord scattered Israel across the whole planet Earth. Okay, you know, we were the you know, the scriptures say Israel will be as the sand of the sea, basically meaning, you know, we're gonna have a heavy population. All right, and we do have a heavy population. So with that, with knowing that, then you should know that you're gonna have Israelite blood and lineage sprinkled in among um, every country and every nation of people. Okay, and like I said, the Sicilians is one prime example of of the so-called Negroes mingling their seed amongst the heathen. Okay, so let's get and you know, this is one reason why we push why we push the gospel, is so that we can basically tell, so we can wake up the Gentiles as well. Okay, the Israelite foreigners. All right, because this is not all about, you know, not every Israelite is going to come, you know, with dark skin and woolly hair and you know you know, just looking like your average Negro, so to speak. Okay, they're gonna look like different shades. They're gonna come in different shades. Okay, so let's get that. One second. Um, this is Jeremiah 12 and 9. Okay, Jeremiah 12 and 9. It says, "Mine heritage unto me is as a speckled bird. The birds round about are against her. Come ye, assemble all the beasts of the field, come to devour." All right, and in my Bible, that word speckled means spotted. Okay, so speckled meaning what? Meaning there's many colors of a bird. Matter of fact, let's look up what a spotted bird looks like. Okay, let's look that up just to get an idea. Okay, here you have a speckled bird. Now you see, it's basically you know, many colors. Okay, it's not just one. It's not one color. It's many colors. So you know, you're gonna have Israelites. Like I said, you're gonna have Israelites coming in different shades. Okay, because it's all about the seed, and you know, and that's one thing that that we want to make clear here at Great Millstone is we're not a black extremist group. We don't even consider ourselves black. We don't consider ourselves brown or any of that. Okay, because it's not about color. It was never about skin color. It's about your seed. It's about who your line goes back to. Either your line goes back to the elect, the chosen people, you know, Israel, or your line goes back to the heathens. Okay, and you can't make yourself of Israel. Okay, if you're not, if you weren't born an Israelite, then that's, you know, that's just too bad. You know. So let's get one more precept. I have one more if I can find it, and we'll close up on that. But like I said, everyone is getting so up in arms about this guy saying the N-word and yada yada yada. But like I said, all he's doing is just quoting and speaking facts. Okay, it says Isaiah 11:11. It says, "And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people, which shall be left from Assyria and from Egypt and from Pathros and from Cush and from Elam and from Shinar and from Hamath and from the isles of the sea." Okay, so it says the remnant. The Lord is going to restore the remnant of his people. Okay, which shall be left from all these different lands. Okay, All right. And it says, and he shall set up an ensign for the nations, and shall assemble the outcasts of Israel, and gather together the dispersed of Judah. Yeah, so what does that mean, outcasts of Israel? Who are the outcasts of Israel? Those are the ones that were spread out and intermingled among the other nations. And it says the dispersed of Judah. Dispersed means scattered, okay? That's another word for scattered. All right, so further proving that our people were scattered. All right, and it says, together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. All right, so our people were spread throughout the four corners of the earth. And, you know, the scriptures say, like I said, whereas the sands of the sea. All right, so just like that guy said in the clip, you know, niggas love to fuck. Okay, so you know, that's just a trait that so-called black men have, is they spread their seed. They're very fruitful. Okay, you know, and they spread their seed everywhere amongst the heathens. All right. So you know, that's pretty much it on that. Like I said, the main point, you know, in recent news is this guy, New York governor. You know, basically, it's further proof. This is further proof that that the Sicilians are so-called black people. All right, because people don't believe us when we say it. You know, so a lot of times we got to bring out people in high places for them to validate it, so that people, you know, so it came out of his mouth, you know, came out of their mouth. All right, and he's a Sicilian himself. All right, so tell us we're lying. All right, so anyway, you know, that's pretty much the point. I want to give all praises to YAHAWAH, BAHASHAM, YAHAWASHI, BAHASHAM, Kakudash. Double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone. Shalom.